Good evening and welcome back to ParaGhoul Paranormal Discoveries from the Dark. If you're new here, this radio show and podcast dives deep into the shadows of Saskatchewan's past to learn what lies within. Sometimes we even go to other locations across Canada to chat about dark history, mysteries, urban legends, and sometimes we even get to talk about some monsters. I'm your host, K.D. Kulpa. I'm a horror author and paranormal researcher in Regina, Saskatchewan. I love digging into the past to bring life to ghosts and monsters hiding in the dark. And I especially love going live with you every week to tell you what I've uncovered. Now, tonight marks an amazing milestone. We are officially wrapping up on the last episode of Season 1 of ParaGhoul Paranormal. I can't believe we're already on the 40th episode together. We've had 14 amazing guest episodes, some of which were two-part episodes, but most of them were single parts. And because we had so many good stories, we couldn't always stop in time, so that's why we just had to do two parts once in a while. We also uncovered 8 urban legends or monsters from Canada's history, 8 episodes about the history of the paranormal industry, including the evolution of the ghost gadgets that you see nowadays on television. And we also did 9 local Saskatchewan haunted histories and experiences, where we either talked to people about their experiences or I talked about some of the places I've personally experienced by going and touring them. But what will be coming in Season 2, you may ask? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So let's get started. Honestly, I am just so grateful for the opportunity to be here with you every week, talking about one of the topics that I've actually been passionate about for as long as I can remember. I still have a hard time believing that I have a weekly radio show and podcast as of tonight, now with 40 episodes, and a group of amazing people like you, my listeners, that support this show and make it as great as it is. And the last time I checked, we were almost at 1,000 downloads on the podcast platform, which is just unbelievable to me, that 40 episodes and we're almost at 1,000 downloads already. And unfortunately, I have no way of knowing how many of you are listening to the show live every Tuesday night, but it's amazing to see in the first season that we might not only surpass 1,000 downloads, but I've had so many of you reach out to me via DMs on social media that I greatly appreciate. And we're starting to get, requests to be interviewed on the show, which is really cool. So thank you to everyone that shares the podcast with their friends and recommends it to others. If you listen to the live radio show but want to check out past episodes that you might have missed, you can find ParaGhoul Paranormal on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, and more. So please keep sharing with anyone you think might be interested in Saskatchewan ghosts and Canadian urban legends. Our listeners are primarily within Western Canada, at least, judging by the podcast platform. I don't know, like I said, I don't know about the radio show, but judging by the podcast platform, we are primarily Western Canadians here. But I have noticed we do periodically have listeners from the United States, United Kingdom, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, Japan, Ireland. It's just amazing to see how much the episodes are spreading across the world, small pieces at a time. So tonight I thought it might be fun to wrap up our first season talking about some of our favorite episodes, as well as my ever-growing bucket list of haunted and eerie places that I hope to visit across Canada, which currently I'm actually thinking about, starting to turn into like provincial tour recommendation kind of things. I don't know. We'll see. You can let me know what you think about that. And my current plans for next season we'll also talk about tonight, which includes an opportunity for you, my listeners, to even be part of ParaGhoul Paranormal next year, with a new monthly episode theme that I'll be bringing to life in Season 2. So make sure you listen until the end so that you can learn more about how you can become part of the show next year. I'm really excited for this new episode's theme. But personally, talking about favorite moments, favorite episodes, It's a hard to really choose one that I would say is my top favorite, because I probably loved every episode in one way or another. This entire show allows me to research and interview people about a topic that, like I said, I've been passionate about for as long as I can remember. Like I've been interested in ghosts and unexplained ever since I was young. So I love everything to do with paranormal, unexplained experiences, on top of, horror and thriller fiction genres, now that I'm an author in those. So whether writing, reading, watching TV or movies, I'm typically looking into these themes on a regular basis anyway. So it's been an absolute pleasure to also get to do it as a weekly radio show and podcast with you. It's been a really big treat for me, honestly. But that being said, if I had to choose favorite episodes, if you were really wanting to know for me which were my favorite, probably my guest episodes would be the top ones for me, as I love talking with others to hear about their experiences and their own personal journeys into, paranormal, the unknown, or the horror genre, because we did have some horror authors on the show as well, and horror publishers. I especially loved having Melanie Cole come on for multiple episodes to help us dig into some historical true crime in Saskatchewan. Those were fun. I'm still blown away by the fact that we have our own axe murder mystery within Saskatchewan. I thought that was such an interesting 2-part series to get into. And I also love talking about the local haunted locations that helped me get started on this path. So if you didn't know, I started out actually doing a photo series where I'd go around and take photos of some of these haunted locations. And I think I called it my Haunted Saskatchewan photo series, which eventually turned into my Haunted Saskatchewan blog posts on my website, kdkulpa.com. And then that eventually turned into this radio show, which is very cool. It wasn't a progression I realized was going to happen, but that's where we are. And, some of those places that got me started on this journey would be the Bushwhacker Brew Pub and the ghost James Strathdee. If you don't know who that is, make sure you go check out the past episode that we covered on him. There was also the Government House and the ghost of Howie, and so many more. Now, one of the ways I hope to expand in season 2 is to start bringing in locations outside of Regina, but more on that in a minute. Now, if I go by the number of downloads to judge what seemed to be our listener favorite episode, so this is on the podcast platform, it sounds like you're all on a similar page as me. So the most downloaded episode was the Saskatoon Axe Murder Mystery with Melanie Cole, which was our Halloween episode in 2024. There was so much to talk about with the murder and mystery around what really happened that we had to do a 2-part series to cover it all. And we ended the episode with more questions than answers, I think. If you missed those episodes, make sure you go back and check out the recordings. It was such a fascinating one that I'm still scratching my head. And remember, there's a letter that we're trying to get our hands on so that we can maybe, get some answers. So like I said, if you missed that one, make sure you go back and listen. So the Saskatoon axe murder happened in the 1920s when a police officer was called to a house to find a confused woman who had woken up in her living room and her husband had been murdered. The axe had never been found, and it all happened around Christmas time. So that, a particularly sad time for a tragedy such as this to occur. Not that it's ever a good time, but that's a particularly sad time. Then the second most popular episode was actually about modern ghost gadgets. This doesn't surprise me, given I do sometimes receive emails and DMs from you, asking me about how to conduct your own paranormal investigation and what tools to use and that kind of thing. So those of us that are, interested in the paranormal and want to have an experience for ourselves, that episode seemed to speak to you. So it seems natural to want to know more about what gadgets actually work versus what are mostly used for entertainment value in the paranormal investigation television shows. And I was actually surprised by what I learned while conducting the research for that particular episode. Even though we had covered, some of the ghost gadgets and the science behind them in previous episodes, like we did an episode on EVPs, we did an episode on the Ouija board, I was still I don't think I'll ever be able to look at paranormal investigation shows the same ever again. Even though I'm an avid believer of ghosts and, some things that go bump in the night, I think having a skeptical mind about those gadgets is also healthy. Finding out that some of them are simply cat toys. I don't know, maybe ghosts like cat toys? I don't know. You can go back and listen to that recording if you want to learn more, but all I can say is, obviously, we can't believe everything those in charge of television want us to believe. So, given who holds our number one spot in the most downloaded episode, it's not surprising to me that Melanie Cole comes in again for number 3, with our episode on the murder of Scotty McLaughlin. If you missed that episode, make sure you go back and check out the recording. If you want to learn more about the skull that used to be thought to be the culprit behind the haunting of the Corrobert Courthouse. Although I'd love to know if they're still experiencing unexplained bumps in the night since the skull has been reunited with its body. So maybe there's something else haunting that building. I don't know. The next 3 episodes in the top 6 are all local Saskatchewan haunts, where I showcased stories from local hauntings, including the Fort Sand Sanatorium, the Regina riot, and the history behind the Regina German Club, which we talked to, Carrie from the Regina German Club and found out all about kind of some of the paranormal activity they've experienced in the building, which was a really cool episode as well. And the mystery of the St. Louis Light, which is a really popular topic when guests come on, from Saskatchewan. A lot of them have stories about it, so we're going to probably have to dig into that one more next season. We'll see. But these top 6 episodes really show me that there is a lot of interest in local Saskatchewan hauntings and histories. And so, this topic is gaining popularity, which is what I set out to do with this show and podcast. I really wanted to help bring light to some of these stories because so many people have shared their ghost stories and, some of the darker histories of Saskatchewan that nobody talks about with me. And so that was kind of the reason why I started the podcast, was to bring some of them to light. So I am extremely grateful that you've been enjoying the show, and I can't wait to see what it grows into for season 2. Now, because we covered so many locations, which included mysteries, hauntings, and mysterious occurrences, my haunted bucket list just keeps on growing. I think I'm going to have to start creating bucket lists per province, because using Canada as a whole is becoming way too large. Maybe I can even turn them into free downloads for each province so that you, the listeners, can download them whenever you are planning a trip to different Canadian provinces. I don't know. We'll see. But what has made my bucket list and why? I think my favorite area right now is going to have to be the eastern provinces for some of the interesting old histories of events and supernatural ties from the 1700s and 1800s. This includes the Dungarvan Whooper, a supposed ghost that lingers in the forest in New Brunswick near Dungarvan River. Although if you recall from that episode, I'm not sure I believe that it's simply a ghost. Yes, at night, there is whooping and yelling in the forest around people when they think they're alone. But what I found more interesting was the strange experiences that people, that live to tell their tales of the Whooper more interesting. So if you recall from the episode, if you've heard it, a supposedly typical experience was to have your food eaten in front of you, but being unable to see who it was that was eating it. To me, that sounds like an invisible man situation, or maybe some being that can become invisible and go undetected by the human eye. I'm not sure, but maybe not a ghost at all. As what ghost has been known to steal food and eat it right in front of you? I don't think I've ever heard of any, but you can let me know if I'm wrong. Then, while in the Dungarvan Whooper area, I could try to see the ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait for myself. Although if you go by the stories that are commonly told by the locals that have seen it, it sounds like that ghost ship prefers to come when the water is frozen. So that might have to be a winter holiday to Prince Edward Island, perhaps, instead of a summer trip. I don't know. Plus, near there is Amherst, where we recently talked about the poltergeist-like activity that is said to have haunted 18-year-old Esther Cox back in the late 1800s. And the Esther Fest, which would be an interesting event to go check out, with all the different paranormal and non-paranormal activities that they do each year to celebrate the Amherst mystery. Now, of course, we also talked about a few Ontario hotspots, and I know they have the Haunted Walks organization that holds many different haunted tours each year, and I think they even sometimes do public paranormal investigations, which I find really interesting. So those have definitely also made it onto my bucket list of places I hope to check out and, likely document for myself. But what about closer to home, like Saskatchewan? We haven't talked about the many Saskatchewan locations that are still on my bucket list, even before I started this show. And I hope to rectify some of that at least this year. And of course, share the stories and experiences that I have on my tours and on my travels on this show. But there are so many on my list right now. This year, I'm hoping to at least check off some of them from southern Saskatchewan locations. Places I'm hoping to visit, tour, and collect, hopefully ghost stories from, would include Old Wives Lake, Gravelburg area, Fort Walsh National Historic Site, Cypress Hills Massacre National Historic Site, Robsart, East End, Shaunavon, Assiniboia, Reedland. Reedland has a personal connection, as my grandpa actually lived there briefly. So my grandpa was originally from the U.S., and him and his family, I think he was only like 4 years old when they moved to Canada, and they stayed in Reedland for a while, which then later had family of ours actually buy a house in Reedland to, kind of commemorate the history. And interestingly enough, the family that lived there also turned out to live in a very haunted house, kind of like I did in Nipawin. And I even had the pleasure, if you want to say pleasure, I guess, of staying in that house as a teenager. So I would love to return to Reedland and see if I can relive some of those experiences for the show and, actually document them, because I think that would be really interesting. Of course, it would also be great to swing down to places like the Castle Butte and the Caves, Weyburn, Cannington Manor. Oh, there's just so many great places to stop and visit, I'm telling you. So if you know anyone in southern Saskatchewan that has a great ghost story or a haunted location that, they want to share, or even really a historically significant building, that has some interesting history behind it, and they'd be willing to let me tour the building, take photos, maybe some videos, then please let me know. I'm always looking for ideas, and I have a contact form on my website that you can use to connect with me. As I said, I'm hoping to visit many of my bucket list items this summer, which I will document on my social media platforms, as well as use the stories I find and the history I dig up to create future episodes in season 2 of this show. Of course, I also hope to go north of Regina eventually as well. I'm not sure I'll have the budget or time to do it all in 1 year, but we'll see how it goes. But I'd love to go up to see, Batoche, Duck Lake, back to Nipawin. So if you remember, that's where I grew up, and there are so many ghost stories there. It really is an interesting little town to visit, so it'd be great to include that in my show eventually. Again, I would also love a chance to walk through the area of the St. Louis Light, potentially even with a drone, to see if we can dig into the mystery a little more. Now we're talking, maybe it's not a ghost train, maybe it's aliens or something, or a portal. But that would require permission from the landowner. So if you know who that is and they are willing to let us dig into the history and take some photos and videos, please let me know. As I said, there are so many Saskatchewan locations on my bucket list that I could probably fill at least 3 more episodes of ParaGhoul Paranormal with episode ideas. Like, honestly, there's so much out there. And I really am starting to think about how to create, like I said, some guides or PDFs for anyone that might be interested in checking out these places as well. Or at least the ones that are open to the public. Like St. Louis Light, it's not open to the public, so I wouldn't be able to put that in a guide. But stay tuned. Maybe eventually. I might create something at some point in the future beyond my YQR Haunts guide. If you remember, we actually did an episode about some of my favorite stories from the YQR Haunts guide, which is a short free guide I created to ghosts and haunted locations in Regina that people can learn more about and check out, as a lot of them are businesses open to the public. But what about season 2? As you can tell, the local Saskatchewan Haunts episodes are definitely going to be sticking around for the next season, given that they are among our favorite episodes, and there are so many more places that I want to visit and research. That episode theme will definitely not be going anywhere anytime soon. However, what changes will be coming to the next season when we return? Obviously, guest episodes will definitely also continue, assuming we continue to have people interested in coming on the show anyway, to, share their paranormal experiences and how they're involved. I've been chatting with some paranormal investigation teams that are interested in coming on the show to talk about their experiences, and maybe they'll even give some advice to anyone interested in getting more involved in that industry. And I've also already had some authors that are interested in coming on the show to talk about their books and their own paranormal experiences. Of course, we'll likely have more also, maybe some podcast hosts, maybe some others kind of in the publishing industry. I don't know. If you have a particular type of person that you want me to try and get on the show, also let me know. I find it fascinating talking to people about not only their experiences or what are their favorite ghost stories, but learning what brought them into, whether it's the horror field, the paranormal field, one of those fields. I find it so interesting to learn what brought them into it. If you remember, this year we also had one on-site episode where we were given access to the college campus building while we interviewed Darcy about the history and ghost stories of the building. That was such a fun episode, and I'll be putting the video of it up on the KDK Ghoul Guild community soon. So it would be great to find a way to do those next season as well. Maybe I'll be able to incorporate some of my traveling to the Southern Saskatchewan bucket list items as on-site episodes, but I'm not sure how that would work yet, so we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, hopefully we'll find some new locations in and around Regina for us to do more on-site episodes, because I think that would be a lot of fun. Of course, there are still many more urban legends and stories about monsters from across Canada. It would have been difficult to try to cover them all in the first season alone, so that will definitely make a comeback in season 2 as well. The only theme that I'm not sure about bringing back is the theme about paranormal history and science behind the gadgets. I feel like we could only have so many episodes of that. So that episode theme might not make it back in season 2, simply because I feel like we already have too many other episodes to do, especially since I am bringing a new episode theme that I think you'll enjoy taking its place. And that is the Haunted Saskatchewan Listener Collection series. So in season 2, I'm hoping to share more of your stories. Each month, I'm hoping to bring at least one episode that features the stories submitted to the show by you, our listeners. I've already created a form that you can find on my social media platforms and website for the show, which allows you to submit your ghost stories and unexplained experiences. If the story fits well into a specific episode, I might even contact you to see if you want your voice heard on the show, so that you can submit either a sound recording or come on the show, and so that we can have an episode where your story is kind of featured, more featured like that. Now, of course, I can't guarantee all stories will be able to make it on the show, and I definitely cannot guarantee that all that submit will be able to come on the show and have their voice heard on the radio, but I will do my best to put together some great episodes and incorporate as many of them as possible. And you can start submitting your stories today. Probably the earlier the better, to be honest, because I'll be setting up my schedule for season 2 in the coming weeks. And you'll want to get your stories submitted before they have to get pushed back to season 3, because it does fill up fairly quickly. Honestly, I think I'm the most excited for the listener collection next year. I've already got a couple episodes decided because I've already have some stories submitted from people that didn't know I was going to be doing this. So that's kind of fun. So please make sure you share the show with anyone you think might have a good story. They won't be required to share their name if they don't want to. They can just give me their initials or ask to be left anonymous. But I think that would be a fun episode theme to incorporate into season 2. I don't know. What do you think? Now, before we wrap up this final episode of season 1, I want to thank everyone at CJTR Access Now Community Radio for trusting me to hold this spot every Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. The team are amazing and extremely supportive, making this such an enjoyable experience. And don't worry, although this is the final episode of season 1, you will still be able to catch ParaGhoul Paranormal every Tuesday night on 91.3 FM CJTR Access Now Community Radio. We will be playing some of our favorite episodes that we've talked about tonight, plus probably a few others, while I'm busy behind the scenes preparing for the bigger and better Season 2. So keep checking back in each week to find out what episode made the list of most popular among listeners, as well as some of our personal favorites. And you can still find me on most social media platforms, either under KDKULPA or ParaGhoul Paranormal. So make sure you go follow me there to find out when Season 2 will be launching and see some of the work I'm busy doing behind the scenes. Plus, you'll probably also get to hear about, if I actually get to go to some of these locations and tour them, because I'll be sharing those pictures and videos and things like that on my platforms. But thank you for joining us tonight for this epic season finale. I'm flabbergasted, honestly. Did you know I also have a weekly newsletter that includes a link to the latest episode of ParaGhoul Paranormal? Subscribers also receive updates about upcoming events, behind the scenes information like when Season 2 will be released, and subscriber only updates on upcoming book releases, book signings, and more. If you are interested, make sure you head to my website at kdkulpa.com to sign up. And stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, where we'll uncover more secrets, unravel more mysteries, and delve deeper into the shadows. Until then, remember to keep your flashlight handy and digital recorders ready. This is Katie Kulpa, signing off for Season 1. Until next time, my ghouls.